Welcome back to the Drew Dillman YouTube channel. Come on, y'all. It is Unbound Week. This is the biggest gravel race in the world. Come on, aren't you guys as excited as I am? 200 miles of dirty bliss. Alright, I'm being a little sarcastic here, but I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't excited and that my entire winter and spring has been focused on this one race. The purpose of this video is to walk you guys through everything that I've done to prepare myself for the Unbound 200 race, including training, and I will also walk you through my race day preparation and strategy. But let's be honest, the real purpose of this video is to take advantage of the Unbound effect, which is a known thing. This is the theory that if you put the word Unbound in your thumbnail and title, it will automatically get a ton of views, and apparently I'm a little late to the party because every other gravel YouTuber has already put out one, if not two, Unbound videos taking advantage of the Unbound effect. Let's start with my training. Now, this is the big one. I have radically changed my training approach to this season in two big ways. First, I've increased my volume. Like every other gravel cyclist, I'm now doing way more hours than I probably should be, and I'm on the verge of overtraining, but this is the spirit of gravel. In years past, I've really tried to make it a goal to hit 20 hours per week. This year, I made it a strong goal to consistently hit 25 hours per week, and I've done a pretty darn good job of upholding that. And to give you an idea of this increase in volume, I'm going to list out the volume per month of the 6 months leading up to Unbound from last year to this year. So last year from December to May, I did 39 hours, 77 hours, 94 hours, 91 hours, 78 hours, and 78 hours with a total of 457 leading up to Unbound. This year, I did 82, 81, 96, 93, 73, and for May it'll be darn close to 100 when it's all said and done, and for 2025 that will be a total of 525 hours. Altogether, that's a 13% increase in volume from last year to this. Last year, I only managed to pull off 3 weeks that were over 25 hours, with only one of those being over 30. This year, I've managed to pull off 7 25-plus hour weeks, with 4 of those being over 30 hours. When you're training this much, overtraining becomes a big issue. For a large part of this spring, I was probably hovering right at the cusp of being overtrained, if not going over that limit at certain times. And this is why recovery becomes so important when you're training this much. And I like to say extreme training takes extreme recovery. So with the increase in volume, I also made my recovery weeks even easier than years past. The second big change that I've made to my training in 2025 is a reverse periodization approach. Now, standard periodization is when you plan out your training so that your most intense workouts are right before your A event, and so the season starts with low intensity and the intensity increases from block to block to block leading up to your A event. With reverse periodization, you basically flip that so that your highest intensity workouts come early in the season and then the intensity decreases throughout the season. I figured this would be a good approach for a few different reasons. First of all, this is very specific to Unbound. Unbound is a race that requires a tremendous amount of time in tempo. So if I did reverse periodization, my tempo training would occur right before the Unbound race, meaning it would be more specific to that race. Another reason for this is because then I will have already done all of my high intensity early in the season, and I was thinking that that would help me to go into races like the Mid-South and Sea Otter that are early in the year a little bit more prepared with that high intensity work already being done. This was a good idea in theory, but based on my results at Sea Otter primarily, I don't think it necessarily worked out according to plan, but hopefully it will for Unbound. Another big change from last year to this year is that last year my training wasn't as focused as it was this year. Last year, I did pro road nats 2 weeks before Unbound, and then I did 4 days of crits the weekend before Unbound. This year, I haven't raced at all in the month of May, and I've done the Unbound block like my competitors. It's been a lot more focused, and I feel a lot more prepared for Unbound. During my Unbound block, I did 3 weeks of training, with those weeks being 25, 26, and 35 hours for my weekly volume, with a total of 86 hours in 20 days. Dizzle Kibitz number 21, with great training comes great recovery. That's a Spider-Man quote. Because I've done more training in the last 3 weeks than I ever have, I also want to make sure that my body recovers from that training. So the 5 days after that block, I only rode a total of 5 hours, with 2 of those days being completely off the bike. Another thing I've added to my recovery protocol is ketones. Now, I feel a little silly for admitting this, but with most of the World Tour teams utilizing ketones as a recovery tool, I have followed suit. A big reason for this is that because we have picked up Ketone Aid as a sponsor for the BonkBros podcast, I unknowingly received a few big boxes of ketones on my front porch, and I'm grateful. If you want free shipping on that, you can go to the BonkBros YouTube channel and use the link in the description to get yourself some ketones. Now, I don't want to spend all day talking about my gym work because I've already talked a lot about that in a few other YouTube videos, but I have been more consistent with my strength training in 2025 than any other year, consistently knocking out 2 to 3 heavy sessions leading up to the race season, and then once racing started in March, I dialed it back to only 1 to 2 sessions per week, with those being maintenance sessions. And it seems to be paying off because I've had a few compliments on my stature already this season. The topic you've all been waiting for, the DIY sauna. That's right, I built myself a sauna. With the gains being very evident and being convinced of these gains after reading and hearing multiple things on podcasts and books about the physiological improvements that you get from heat training, I thought it would be in my best interest to acquire a sauna. And at first I had ordered one off of Amazon. It got delivered to my house. But after further research, I realized it only got up to 140 degrees, and most of what I had read and heard was that the hotter you can get, the better the results. Getting all the way up to 180 degrees is kind of like the golden standard, and if the one from Amazon only got me up to 140, that wasn't going to cut it, so I returned that thing and went all in on building one in my basement. So I went the route of a traditional sauna, knowing that it could get up to these higher temps. It's basically just a very well insulated box with a vapor barrier and a cheap shower door with some rubber seals to try to trap as much heat on the inside as possible, with cedar planking all around it for cosmetics, but also because that cedar planking is resistant to moisture and heat. I did get the sauna heater off of Amazon, which was a good purchase, and you already know that I bought all of the other supplies from Save Big Money at Menards. 11% rebate should be in the mail any day now. Or like Bon Jovi, you know that Bon Jovi song, on this steel horse I ride. Like, the main purpose of the sauna and other heat training is for the main purpose of, in the most simple terms, improving the efficiency of your blood. It's similar to altitude training in that it naturally raises levels of EPO in your body. So basically, it's natural doping. My protocol was that I hit the sauna every day except on my recovery days, which ended up being 4 to 5 times every week. On top of the sauna, I've also been riding outdoors with extra layers, including leg warmers. Now, in the last 3 weeks, I've only ridden outside without leg warmers twice on 2 of my interval sessions. And the thinking behind this is less scientific and has more to do with the fact that if I get really comfortable with being hot on the bike on race day, I will be a little more desensitized to the heat and be able to bear the heat a little bit better than my competitors. Dizzle Kibit's number 6, eat more carbs. The trend in endurance sports over the past few years is more carbs equals more better. We have only seen that as carb intake increases, poor performance also increases. The only caveat with this is that as you increase your carb intake, the likelihood of GI distress also increases. It gets harder to take in that many carbs per hour when you're exercising at a high intensity. A few months ago, I listened to a podcast with David Roach. This is the guy that broke the record at the Leadville Trail 100 run last year. And he doesn't have world-class physiology. He admits that his VO2 is lower than the previous winners by a significant amount, although both of them have a much higher VO2 than me. So he approached this race as a mad scientist with spreadsheets and numbers and running all kinds of tests and training his body to do crazy things. And he was able to break the record. And one of the biggest things he talked about in that video was training his gut for an increased carb intake. So after listening to this podcast, I had a renewed motivation to try to increase my carb intake up to possibly 150 grams per hour. However, in training and racing up to this point, have only gotten up to about 130, which is a gain from, or an improvement from, my previous carb intake of about 110 per hour. So I do think that it's better, but I haven't quite been able to get as high as I wanted to. I plan to get the majority of these carbs from the GOODLIFE Nutrition carb mix, with supplementing that with Rice Krispie treats and gel mix throughout the race. Consuming solid foods during a race is not ideal, I will admit this. But I'm going to be eating some Rice Krispie treats early in the race before my gut gets all out of whack to try and prevent some palate fatigue that might occur later in the race. So if I eat some Rice Krispie treats early in the race, although that's not ideal or optimal, I should be able to increase my carb intake via gels and carbohydrate drink mix later in the race because my palate won't be so destroyed from having drank and eaten that stuff for 10 hours. One of the biggest mistakes I made in 2024 Unbound is hydration. I didn't have enough hydration throughout the race and I paid for it massively in the last 2 hours. At Unbound this year, I'm not going to make that mistake. I'm planning to carry about 1 liter of water per hour of racing, except for the first few hours when we start before dawn, and I probably won't be drinking as much in the first 2 to 3 hours. Bro, how are you going to carry that much water if there's only 2 stops in a matter of 200 miles? Well, good question, and this leads us to our next topic, bike setup. The biggest thing that I was trying to figure out with my bike setup this year was how to carry all this water and eliminate having to carry a hydration pack during the race. The idea behind not having a hydration pack has to do with heat dissipation. If I don't have a hydration pack on my back, that means my back can get rid of or shed a lot of the heat, and overheating at Unbound is a massive consideration and a massive problem that many riders suffer from during the race. And I figured if I could eliminate the pack off my back, I could handle the heat. And if I take all that water off my back, I have to put it somewhere else, and so I've tried to figure out a way to put that on my bike. I'll be using 1 liter water bottles, and with these bigger, taller, heavier water bottles, you have to have a much stronger bottle cage, and I've upgraded my bottle cages to the Dawn to Dusk super strong carbon bottle cages thanks to BIKETIRESDIRECT. You can use code RADDADDIZZLE for 10% at checkout. I also have a profile design 250 milliliter flask bolted to my top tube, along with a jerry-rigged 500 milliliter profile design aero bottle also on my top tube. So between all 3 of those different things, 4 things, I'll have nearly 3 liters of water attached to my bike. I did experiment with the out front hydration system that Profile Design makes that you may have seen on Chase Works Unbound bike before, but I needed to save that spot for my GoPro for you so that I could get that standard YouTube footage that I'm known for from the handlebars, and that's the easiest place to mount my GoPro and have it not interfere with my racing. I've also got a few 500 and 250 milliliter flexible gel flasks that I'm going to freeze solid to use as ice packs that will then melt into hydration. And I plan to use these. That could get me another 1 liter of hydration. However, with the longest stop between aids being 80 miles, I'm going to probably have to use a small 1 to 1.5 liter bladder, and I plan to just stick that down the back of my jersey in between those 2 aids, but for the rest of the race, I won't have any kind of a bladder or pack. I'm opting to run the LaufSegler with the suspension fork. My thinking behind having the suspension fork is that most of the race is on dirt, so there's really no disadvantage to running it, and the biggest advantage to running it is that it prevents flat protection. If I'm gonna be in that main group for the majority of the race, and hopefully I am, the likelihood of you hitting random big rocks increases quite a bit, and if I have some more cushion on that front wheel, hopefully when I hit those hard things, the shock will absorb that and I will decrease the risk of a flat tire. The other big thing about my bike setup, no pun intended, are the tires. The LaufSegler is known to fit very easily, 2.2 mountain bike tires, and so my go-to tire choice if it's dry will be the Continental Race Kings 2.2, and if it's muddy, I'll swap over to the Challenge Getaway 40s. Both of these tires are very well known for flat protection, which is probably the #1 concern at Unbound when it comes to tire protection, and I'll have these tires mounted up to the Zip 303 Explore SW wide rims. I think the thing that I'm most excited about my bike setup are these brand new profile design Canta race bars. They're carbon fiber, they're aerodynamic to the max. They're 36s in the hoods and even narrower if you turn in your hoods, which is what they're designed to do. But then they flare out to a 40 in the drops, but they don't do the typical lame gravel flare where it just sticks totally out. They flare out, but then they go back to being straight, and so the drops actually look like standard drops. They're just wider than at the hoods. This allows you to get into a really easy aerodynamic position in the hoods, but also have pretty good handling position with the wider stance in the drops. I've got the SRAM Red 13-speed group set with 48 tooth front chainring. I'll have the Look Keo Carbons for road pedals. If it's dry, I'll swap over to the Look Carbon X-Trax if it's muddy. And I've got the specialized Roman Evo 3D printed saddle. Now this is the exciting part, because with Chase Warg as my teammate and with his history as a bike racer, you can already know that we've got some exciting stuff planned up our sleeve, but I don't want to spoil the beans here for sake of suspense, so you'll have to tune in after the race or during the race to see what our plan looks like exactly, but I am going to give you some of my strategy that I'll be implementing this year at Unbound. Hint, hint, Dizzle Kibitz number 8. The early break rarely works, but when it does, it'll be awesome. My main strategy last year was to conserve a ton of energy and pass a bunch of people in the last 50 miles. In hindsight, that was a pretty dumb strategy. I ended up being way too relaxed going into the first few technical sections and ended up way off the back of the main group, having to chase back up, which was basically a ton of wasted energy. In fact, to make this point even clearer, for the first 100 miles of the race, mine and Chase's power, normalized power from last year, was nearly exactly the same, 277 and 278. However, he was off the front and I was off the back. Nearly the same energy expenditure and two very different races. Interesting enough, Dylan, who rode in the main group for the majority of the race, had a normalized power that's 10 watts higher than both of ours. So this year, one of the biggest strategies I plan to implement is better positioning in the pinch points of the race. This is going to happen because we're going to do much better recon than I did last year, so I'll actually be very much more aware of where those pinch points occur. But also, I think having a teammate in the race helps to give me some confidence, because something that happens to me that's very well known is the imposter syndrome. So basically you get to the front of the race and I look around and I see all these big names like Keegan and Alexi and all these just fast dudes, and I start to think, man, I don't belong here. I'm not as fast as these guys. And this is the typical imposter syndrome that people deal with. Dizzle Kibitz number 20. don't ignore your weaknesses. I believe that having a teammate in the race will help me with this problem. When you see your teammate at the front of the race, it gives you confidence to also be at the front of the race. And if I'm not at the front of the race, I'm not only letting myself down, I'm also letting down my teammates. So having Chase in the race alongside me, I think will be a big boost and will help me to better position throughout this race. I'm still not 100% sure what my race day plan looks like, whether that's getting TV time, like Chase has done in the past, or if it's just to focus on getting the best result possible, which would be mediocre at best. And it could be that these two things actually go hand in hand. Either way, I think that me and Chase, after hanging out for an entire week in Emporia, will have some pretty crazy concoctions ready to go on race day. Me and Chase have put in a ton of training, preparation, planning, talking, the whole shebang for this race. This is easily the biggest race on our race calendar throughout the season, and we're excited to get to Emporia, Kansas to race this weekend. Stay tuned to see how it all shakes out. I'll see you guys next week for the race analysis.